Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we're continuing the Gloomhaven series of character builds, where we're trying to take the character classes from the hit board game Gloomhaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. We are on to our last character class from Gloomhaven, the base game in particular, and we will hit Forgotten Circles before jumping over to Jaws of the Lion and Frosthaven. For what it's worth though, this is our last locked character class from the base game of Gloomhaven, and we're going to be making the Circles class today. So as usual, this is our spoiler warning. If you don't want any spoilers for the Circles class from Gloomhaven, feel free to watch the video at a later time. I'm not going to take any offense. But if you already know what the character class is, or you just don't really care about spoilers, or you even just want to see what this build will do in Dungeons & Dragons, then feel free to come along for the journey. I'm going to do a quick pause now, but then we'll jump into the build right after that. Okay, let's get started. Today we are looking at making the Circles class, which is also known as the Summoner. The Summoner is literally the class that revolves around the use of summons in Gloomhaven. Other classes may have a couple of summon options or like a summon build in them, and some might even have one core summon that the class and its mechanics revolve around. But the Summoner is all about getting the most potential of the summon mechanic by having an army of summons at their disposal. They can also refresh these cards to get the summons back after those summons have died in combat, and that just gives them all the more longevity in terms of the actual Gloomhaven game. Looking at the Summoner in Gloomhaven, they are both one of the worst and most powerful classes in the game at any given point in time. Depending on the scenario and how long it is, or how many enemies there are, or how tough it is, it can be really powerful to have a whole bunch of extra summoned allies in your party. However, it can also be pretty risky, because all the summons are lost cards, meaning that as soon as they're gone, they're gone. You normally can't get them back. The Summoner does have a way to get around that a little bit, but for the most part, once our summons are gone, that's it. And because none of them are necessarily that tanky, it can be pretty easy to lose them, given that the way summons work and their sort of game AI, so to speak, isn't really the brightest. This is inadvertently going to make us a relatively powerful character in combat, given that we'll be able to do most things that other casters can do, plus we have extra summoned allies if we need them. And yes, we're going to be a caster class, because we wouldn't really get the right amount of power from our summons if we weren't a full caster. I will also say, it's also going to be one of the simplest and yet most complex builds that we've done for Gloomhaven, given that all we really want is lots of summons and buffs for our summons. But it's the way we go about that that's going to make it a little bit tricky, since there are lots of summon spells, sure, but the features that work with those spells are kind of hit or miss. Before we start the build though, let's look at their flavor text. Existing simultaneously across an infinite number of planes can be both a curse and a blessing. With the proper concentration, an Aether Summoner can pull anything she wishes across the planar boundaries. With infinite planes comes infinite possibilities. Such efforts can be incredibly taxing, however, and a Summoner finds it much easier to transport living things or raw energy. Starting at character creation with our lineage, we are an Aether, or Aether, depending on how you pronounce it. Just like our Eclipse class was, we are a humanoid that has fused with another plane of existence. In our case, that plane is of, well, everything. We're able to summon forth all sorts of creatures from across space and maybe time, but certainly from space and different planes of existence. These creatures can then aid us in combat, though really they're just doing that by adding extra characters to the battlefield, whether that's from Gloomhaven or D&D. That's all we're looking to do, is just find a way to summon up a creature into combat that can just act as another character on our side. For our lineage, much like our Eclipse class was, we're going to do custom lineage to create our Aether, or Aether. And for that, we're going to get to choose between either Dark Vision or a skill, and I'll say Dark Vision, because we don't really need the skill, and it feels kind of appropriate for a character that's stuck between layers of existence, or planes of existence. We also get to have a +2 for our stats, and then we get a free feat. For our free feat, we're going to take Resilient here, and we're going to increase Dexterity with it. The class we're picking at level 1 isn't going to have saving throw proficiency in Dexterity, so it's a pretty good pick, at least for this. But you could also pick up Constitution for Resilient if you wanted proficiency in Constitution saves, since we're not going to gain that either. I'll let you toss up and pick which one is better for the build between the two. For our actual stats, we're putting the +2 from Custom Lineage into our Intelligence, then we're taking the +1 from Resilient and putting it into either Dexterity or Constitution. After point buy, we're going to end up with the following ability scores: 8 Strength, 14 Dexterity, 14 Constitution, 16 Intelligence, 14 Wisdom, and 9 Charisma. You can shift those ability scores around if you really want to, but we do want Intelligence to be our primary score, and we want 14 in Wisdom at least for multi-classing. The 14 Dexterity and Constitution will show up no matter which one we put the +1 from our free feat into, so again, choose whatever you want for that. Finally, for our background, anything you can think of that would fit really well will work for us. Starting off the build at level 1, we are Wizard 1. We just gain Arcane Recovery and Spellcasting here. You can pick any cantrips and spells that you actually like. We're not really too worried about them, given that the only spells we're ever going to care about are the summon spells, or maybe some conjure spells. At level 2, we are Wizard 2, and here we gain our choice of subclass. We're going to pick the Conjuration Wizard, if that wasn't kind of obvious already. Conjuration Wizard will eventually give us some powerful buffs to our actual summoned creatures, but for now it's going to take us a little while to get there, so we can at least lay the groundwork for what will eventually be a powerful summon-based character. At level 3, we are hopping over to Druid, and we are Druid 1. Our Wisdom isn't that great, so the spell casting that we get here isn't going to be too important. What we are going to want to do is just eventually pick up some features from Druid that will help buff our summons. At level 4, we are Druid 2, and here we gain our Druid subclass. We're going to pick the Circle of the Shepherd for our Druid circle, and that is going to start also giving us some actual powerful buffs to our summoned creatures. For starters, we gain the Speech of the Woods feature and Spirit Totem. Speech of the Woods isn't too important. We're able to read, write, and speak Sylvan, and we can also technically talk to beasts, or at least beasts can understand our speech, and we can decipher their noises and motions. That's all okay and very nature-oriented, but still a nice little bonus. As far as our Spirit Totem ability, this is actually a little bit more important. As a bonus action, we can magically summon an incorporeal spirit to a point that we can see within 60 feet of ourselves. The spirit creates an aura in a 30-foot radius around that single point. It's not a creature, it's not an object, it just basically is a buffed aura, but it has a specific point that aura extends from, and we can move it as a bonus action up to 60 feet on further turns. It'll last for a minute, and then after that we have to complete a rest of any kind before we can use it again. The main thing we wanted with the Spirit Totem feature is the Bear Spirit. There are two others, Hawk and Unicorn, that are also pretty good, but the Bear Spirit's really nice because it gives our allies in the area 5 plus our Druid level of temporary hit points. In addition, us and our allies all gain advantage on strength checks and strength saves while in the aura, and because that is all just ally based, that'll really scale well for the more summons we have up. Level 5, we are Druid 3, and here we gain the first summon spell on our list. We're going to pick up Summon Beast. Summon Beast is a pretty good spell that scales better if we can have access to higher level spell slots, which of course we'll be able to. At the very least, this is our first actual summoned ally who's going to help us in combat. At level 6, we are Druid 4, and here we gain our first ability score improvement, or feat. And for us, we are just improving our intelligence by +2. Intelligence is still our main spellcasting ability, even though we're more Druid than Wizard right now. But for what it's worth, we'll eventually be more Wizard than Druid, and we're really going to benefit from having a better intelligence than an even break between intelligence and wisdom. At level 7, we are a Druid 5, and here we gain access to 3rd level spells. Here we gain our next summon spell, which is actually a conjure spell, and it's Conjure Animals. This spell is infamous for being a plague against dungeon masters, and I have seen it in action both as a dungeon master and as a player, not one who used it, but one who saw it happen. And yes, this spell can be quite annoying and is very hard to really judge how powerful it can be. Technically speaking, one well-placed fireball will just remove most of the animals summoned by this spell. However, if those animals stick around for long enough, you can have a lot more action economy on the party side than on the DM's side. And while that isn't necessarily a real thing to balance, it just becomes a hassle for bogging down combat, balancing encounters, or any other sort of issues that can really wreck a DM's dreams of a nice encounter. We don't want to use this all the time, but for what it's worth, if ever we want to actually have like 2 wolves in the field or another number of some various creatures, it would be nice to be able to have multiple summons up, and Conjure Animals is going to be the way to do this. We don't want to abuse this spell, we just want to have it in our back pocket for any situation where maybe we're on our own and we need a couple more allies as backup. Our go-to is still Summon Beast, cast at the highest level spell slot possible to make just one really powerful summon as opposed to a bunch of weak summons. At level 8 we are Druid 6, and here we gain the Mighty Summoner feature. Mighty Summoner is our first buff to our actual summon creatures. However, it only affects beasts or fae that are summoned or created by a spell that we use. And, more to the point, it's only helpful on some spells, rules as written at least. It says that when we summon a creature with a spell slot, that creature appears with more hit points than normal, gaining 2 extra hit points per hit die that it has. Also, the damage from its natural weapons is considered magical for the purpose of overcoming immunity and resistance to non-magical attacks and damage. That's really awesome and stacks really well with the Conjure Animals spell, but again, we don't want to really abuse that too much. However, for the summon spells, like Summon Beast for example, where the creature does not have hit dice, it is going to function a little weird. Rules as written, we're not getting the most benefit out of this feature for that type of spell. However, if you have a generous DM, hopefully they will work with you to find a way to balance this feature with the summon spells from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It's only going to affect beast or fae summons anyways, so it's not going to break the game if you were to gain 2 extra hit points per spell level cast, or even just 1 extra hit point per spell level cast. At level 9, after finally picking up Mighty Summoner, we are now back to Wizard 3. As Wizard 3, we are now going to gain 2nd level spells for our Wizard class, and we can pick up any spells that we actually want to use with our Intelligence, which is again our primary ability score. At level 10, we are at Wizard 4, and because of that we gain our next ability score improvement / feat. I'm going to say we're going to improve our Intelligence by +2 to just cap it, and have that again as our primary ability score, meaning that we're going to scale very well for the rest of our actual levels. However, if you did want to, you could take a Wisdom buff of +2 to make our Wisdom-based spell casting a little bit better as well, if you wanted. At level 11, we are now Wizard 5, and we gain access to 3rd level Wizard spells. This is also awesome because it gives us access to the most amount of summon spells that we could ask for. We technically already got access to the spell Summon Fae back at Druid 5, though I did forget to mention it because I was kind of assuming that it was going to just pop up here anyways. However, for what it's worth, we definitely have it by now, and we also have Summon Undead, Summon Shadow Spawn, and Summon Lesser Demons. Pick your 2 favorite of these summon spells to have now. Again, we can always just prepare Summon Fae as a Druid spell instead of a Wizard spell, allowing us to pick up a different 3rd level Wizard spell like Fireball, Haste, or a Counter spell, any other good ones. And then next level, just pick up the other 2 summon spells that you didn't get from this level. At level 12, we are Wizard 6, and here we still have access to all those other summon spells I mentioned last level, so we'll probably want to pick up whatever we didn't pick up last level. And we also gain the next Conjuration Wizard feature, which is Benign Transposition. This is just a teleport feature, so again, it's not something that's super Gloomhaven oriented, though the summoner does get access to teleport from Gloomhaven in the Forgotten Circles expansion. And for what it's worth, it can be a useful feature for us. It's just not exactly what we want in terms of our summon mechanics / gameplay. Level 13, we are Wizard 7, and here we gain our next set of summon spells. We gain access to the 4th level ones, which are Summon Aberration, Summon Construct, and Summon Elemental. Again, we at this point now have a whole plethora of summon spells to be able to choose from, but we can only have 1 at a time. Technically speaking, as long as we're only planning on using 1 per combat, We have a lot of longevity given that we can either upcast our lower level summon spells to higher level, or just break out the high level summon spells like Aberration, Construct, and Elemental, and then save those lower level spell slots for the other lower level summoned creatures. At level 14, we're a Wizard 8, and here we get another ability score improvement / feat. Since I did say that this character is one of our simplest builds, we're just going to do something really simple and improve our dexterity by +2. That'll increase our AC, which will hopefully mean that we're less likely to get hit, and because we have a summon on the field, hopefully they'll be more likely to take the hits anyways for us, making us less of a squishy character. For what it's worth though, if you didn't feel like a dexterity improvement was really worth investing in, then investing in wisdom, maybe even constitution, or any feats that you really like would also be really good options as well. Feel free to pick whatever you want here. On level 15, we're a Wizard 9, and here we're going to gain 2 more powerful summon spells, Summon Celestial and Summon Draconic Spirit. The summoner in Gloomhaven never had the ability to bring in full-on dragons to the scenario, but we certainly do. Summon Draconic Spirit is now probably our go-to since it is just a really powerful and versatile spell, but reasonably you could choose any other summon spell to use if you still had a favorite. At level 16, we are a Wizard 10, and that means that we now get Focused Conjuration. This is another really powerful summoner buff feature that just says that as long as we're concentrating on a conjuration spell, we cannot lose concentration as a result of taking damage. That is absolutely amazing, but I should point out that that isn't going to actually work with every single one of the summon spells, because not every single one of the summon spells is a conjuration spell. Summon Undead, for example, is actually a necromancy spell. So keep your eye out for which ones actually are conjuration spells versus which ones aren't. But for the most part, assuming we are concentrating on an actual conjuration summon spell, now we just won't lose concentration on that spell. Meaning that before, when we might lose concentration and we might have to use another spell slot to bring another creature into the fight, that's not going to happen anymore. It's just going to give us that much more longevity and control over our summoned allies in our fights. At level 17, we are Wizard 11. Here we gain 6 level spells, and that means the big Summon Fiend spell. At level 18, we're a Wizard 12, and here we gain our last ability score improvement / feat. And again, we're just improving our dexterity by another +2, or at least that's what I'm saying we're doing. You can again feel free to choose whatever you would like. At level 19, we are Wizard 13, and here we don't really gain any more summon spells or conjure spells unless there are some that I'm forgetting. Technically, I did gloss over the other demon-based spells, which are like Summon Greater Demon, Infernal Calling, or anything along those lines. But because those are built more for roleplay and actually like conversing or socially interacting with the creatures they summon rather than just sheer combat, I felt it was just best to not really worry about those for this build in particular. Though you could if you wanted to. Finally, at level 20, we gain the Conjuration Wizard Capstone, which is also effectively our capstone. We gain Durable Summons, and Durable Summons is our summoner be-all, end-all dream of a summon buff. It just says that any creature that we summon or create with a conjuration spell has 30 temporary hit points. So for example of why this spell is so good, Summon Draconic Spirit is a conjuration-based spell. And that means that if we cast it, not only are we just not losing concentration on it by taking damage, but it also would start out with 50 hit points, and it gains 10 for every level that we upcast it by from 5th. So if it's 6th level, it would have 60 hit points because 50 plus 10. This 30 temporary hit points effectively means that we just get to upcast it as 3 levels higher than whatever we would normally cast it at. And if we wanted to cast Summon Draconic Spirit at 9th level, that would mean it would have 120 hit points total, which would basically be the same thing as casting it as a 12th level spell. Alright, let's summarize what we have. In terms of being the actual summoner from Gloomhaven, we're fairly close. We can't get a bunch of summons on the field at any one given point in time because all of our summon spells are concentration. However, the spells that we do have up and running are usually very powerful because we can upcast them to, well, 9th level if we really want to. Also, because our concentration on at least conjuration spells is very hard, if not impossible, to lose, that's going to give us a lot of longevity in terms of using one powerful summon for one fight, and then the next fight, cast the next lowest level spell slot to have another powerful summon for that fight, and so on and so forth. For our regrets, if you did actually want to do a summoner build where you had a bunch of little summons as opposed to one big one, well, Conjure Animals does technically work for that, but your DM will probably hate you. But other options would involve picking up classes that have built-in ally/summoned creatures into their class features. Something like the Steel Defender from the Battlesmith Artificer, or the Fire Spirit from the Wildfire Druid as well could both work. The reason I didn't really build those into this build specifically is because those allies usually scale better with the classes that they are from. Because we wanted 14 levels of Conjuration Wizard to have durable summons, there wasn't really a lot of room to be able to take those other subclasses and get the extra ally, especially not at higher levels when the extra ally wouldn't really be pulling its weight as much as it could if we had specialized more into those classes. Plus, having a bunch of those types of allies would really oversaturate our bonus action, which right now is almost completely unspoken for, unless of course you had some method of picking up something that uses our bonus action in combat. However, in terms of actual Gloomhaven, we are pretty close. We don't have each of the summons that the summoner gets like 1-to-1, but we're close enough that I'd say we can feel pretty good about ourselves. We can get a couple of wolves with Conjure Animals. We have one really powerful fire summon with either our Fiend or our Summon Draconic Spirit. It's not really a lava golem, but it could be, or even summon elemental. Cast at a really high level as a fire elemental could be a lava golem. Other than that, there's not a lot to our summoner build. The summoner is a very straightforward character, but can be complex depending on how many summons you have going and what the summons really do. And just like that, our build is pretty simple and straightforward in that we just want summon spells. What's complex about it is just how we get those summon spells and how we get the buffs that help those summon spells. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would do to change to get closer to the theme of the actual Gloomhaven character class, or if I missed any powerful summon options or buffs to summons that we could have also picked up. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey, and I hope to see you in the next one.